I've cancelled all your cards. You're so broke now you'll have to ask me even for tampon money. My husband yelled. His mom smirked. Hunger makes women behave fast. An hour later the bank called and her face turned pale. Before we continue, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to hear my story. If you're comfortable, let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is where you are. Now let me tell you my story. The penthouse was a glass box in the sky, a monument to my husband's ego, and tonight it was full of his favorite sound, the sycophantic laughter of men who wanted his money. Another million by March. I'm telling you, Marcus boomed. He held his whiskey glass aloft. The 40-year-old king of his own, carefully constructed world. His mother, Brenda, seated on a white suede sofa that cost more than my first car, drank it in. Her eyes, sharp and possessive, never left her son. To Brenda, Marcus was a god, and she was his high priestess. I was, as always, the silent, beautiful accessory. Amani, darling, you're not drinking. One of the investors, a man whose name I'd already forgotten, slurred at me. I smiled. It was the smile I had perfected over 5 years of marriage. Serene, empty, and just a little bit stupid. I'm just enjoying the view, I said. My voice was soft, exactly as Marcus and Brenda had trained it to be. I was Imani Sterling, 35 years old, and my full-time job was to be the perfect wife. I managed the household, which in their world was a polite euphemism for doing nothing. I arranged the caterers, I approved the floral arrangements, I wore the clothes Marcus bought me, and I kept my mouth shut. Tonight's performance was a dinner for a new round of potential investors. Marcus was a master at this. He was all charisma and big-picture promises, a whirlwind of energy and expensive cologne. He sold them a dream and they loved him for it. Brenda, of course, was his greatest champion. My son, he just has the touch, she was saying to a younger couple, her voice dripping with manufactured modesty. Ever since he was a little boy, everything he touched just turned to gold. I almost choked on my sparkling water. I knew, with the cold hard certainty of a balance sheet, that this was all a lie. The penthouse, the least art, the $500 bottle whiskey, it was a stage. A beautifully dressed, incredibly expensive hollow stage. For 5 years I had played my part. I had silenced the woman I used to be. I had buried her under layers of silk, cashmere, and smiling, dutiful obedience. They thought I was a prop. They thought I was a beautiful, simple girl who had gotten lucky. They had made the fatal, catastrophic mistake of never asking what I did before I met them. They had no idea who I really was. And as I stood there smiling my empty smile, I was doing what I've always done. I was counting, I was observing, and I was waiting. The party was winding down. The sycophants, well-fed and half-drunk on promises, were filtering out into the private elevator, slapping Marcus on the back and kissing the air near my cheek. Wonderful, Marcus. Just wonderful. Imani, you look stunning, as always. I kept smiling, the muscles in my face aching. We were at the door saying goodbye to the last and most important guest. Mr. Akintola. He was new money, sharp, quiet, and unlike the others he hadn't been drinking. He was an engineer, a man who dealt in facts not fluff, and he was the one Marcus needed most. A beautiful home, Marcus Akintola said, his voice a polite, deep baritone, and a compelling pitch. We get it done well, Marcus boomed, clapping him on the shoulder, a gesture that was too familiar. We're a rocket ship, my friend. You just have to get on board. Akintola smiled a small, tight smile. He was not a rocket ship kind of man. He paused, his hand on the elevator button. I just have one final question. Your fourth quarter projections. Your cost of goods sold seems optimistic. Extremely optimistic. How are you hedging against the new import tariffs on the polysilicon from Shenzhen? The air in the hallway froze. I saw the flash of panic in Marcus's eyes. He was a salesman. He didn't do details. He fumbled. Just as I knew he would, he gave a loud, dismissive laugh. Well, you're getting into the weeds. I pay a whole team of geniuses to worry about the weeds. You just worry about the harvest. He clapped him on the back again. Akintola did not laugh. His hand was still on the button. He just watched Marcus, his eyes assessing, his checkbook clearly closing. The silence was excruciating. Marcus's smile was frozen. Brenda from the living room had stopped talking. I couldn't help it. The woman I used to be, the woman who hated sloppy numbers and lazy answers, spoke up. My voice was quiet, cutting through the tension. He's over-leveraged on a single supplier, I said. All three of them turned to look at me. It was as if a piece of furniture had just spoken. The 20% tariff is a problem, I continued, my voice steady, my eyes on Akintola, but you can mitigate it by rerouting the raw material through the secondary processing hub in Ho Chi Minh City. It's a 12% value add, so it qualifies as a Vietnamese origin product. The numbers look bad on paper, but if you amortize the initial logistics setup over 6 months, the actual margin erosion is only 1.4%. The silence that followed was a different kind. It was heavy, shocked. Akintola's eyes widened. He looked from me to Marcus, and back to me. The dismissal was gone. He was impressed. That's, he said, exactly the answer I was looking for. Mrs. Sterling, your husband is a lucky man, to have that kind of insight at home. Oh, she likes to read, Marcus stammered. His face pale, his smile a rictus of horror. Akintola nodded, but his eyes were still on me. Indeed. Thank you for the clarification. The elevator doors opened. He stepped in. I'll have my people call your people, Marcus. The doors slid shut, leaving me, my husband and his mother in the arctic cold silence of the hallway. The click of the deadbolt locking was the only sound. It was like the hammer clicking back on a revolver. I stood perfectly still. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just waited. Marcus didn't move for a full 10 seconds. He just stared at the polished marble floor. I could see a vein throbbing in his temple. Baby, Brenda said from the living room, her voice a low, warning hiss. Now she didn't mean... He exploded. It wasn't a yell. It was a low, venomous growl that ripped out of his chest. Who the hell do you think you are? He turned to me. His face, so charming and handsome moments before, was a twisted, ugly mask of pure, unfiltered rage. You embarrassed me, he spat, stalking toward me, in front of my investors, in my home. You publicly castrated me. Marcus, I said, my voice calm, which I knew would only make it worse. He was walking away. He had a technical question. I gave him a technical answer. I didn't ask for your answer, he roared, now full volume, spittle flying from his mouth. Your job is to stand there, to smile, and to keep your pretty mouth shut. That's it. That's the entire job. She did, baby, Brenda said, coming up behind him, her hand on his back. She was the gasoline, and he was the fire. She made you look like you don't even know your own business. After all you've given her, this house, those clothes. She was nothing before you. I know, he screamed. He was pacing now, a caged tiger, his hands grabbing his hair. He needed to reestablish his dominance. He needed to make me small again, fast. You think you're so smart? Is that it? You think you're smarter than me? I just answered his question, Marcus. I repeated, my voice flat. That was the trigger. My calmness, it was a rejection of his power. His rage wasn't working. It wasn't making me cry or cower. So he had to escalate. He had to find a new weapon, a better one. You're smart? He sneered. Okay, smart girl. Let's see how smart you are. What's 0 minus 0? Because that's what you are without me. His eyes darted to the console table by the door. He saw my purse, an expensive crocodile skin bag he had bought me. He had found his weapon. He lunged for the purse. It wasn't a grab, it was an act of violence. He snatched it from the marble console and with a grunt he upended it. Everything I owned scattered across the floor. My keys, a silver lipstick, a compact, my phone, and my wallet. This, he roared, kicking the lipstick. This is what you are? He snatched the wallet from the floor. He ripped it open, his fingers fumbling with the clasp. He pulled out the cards, a fan of plastic and potential, the Platinum Amex, the joint checking debit card, the Saks department store card. This is me, he screamed, waving them in my face. That's my name on there. My money. My power. You just get to hold it. Marcus, baby. That's right, you tell her. Brenda cooed, her arms crossed, a small ugly smirk on her face. She was enjoying this. You think you're so smart? Marcus was panting, his face red. He pulled out his phone, his thumb jabbing at the screen. You want to be smart? Let's see how smart you are with nothing. I watched him. I knew what he was doing. He was logging into the banking app. Done? He shouted, jabbing the screen one last time. I've cancelled all your cards. Every single one. Cancelled, frozen. They're just plastic now, you're done. He threw the wallet and the useless cards at my feet. They scattered on the cold marble like dead leaves. He was breathing hard, a triumphant, ugly look in his eyes. He had found his power again. He had made me small. He laughed. It was a short, sharp, barking laugh of pure, desperate relief. He was back in control. "You're so broke now," he sneered. His face inches from mine. "You'll have to ask me even for tampon money." He stepped back, triumphant, into the arms of his mother. Brenda, her face a mask of smug victory, didn't even look at me. She looked at her son. She patted his cheek. "Don't you worry, Marcus," she said, her voice loud enough for me to hear. A cold, sharp blade. Hunger makes women behave fast. She'll learn her manners by morning. They turned their backs on me, a united front, and walked toward the living room, leaving me standing alone in the grand hallway, amid the wreckage of my purse. They were waiting for the sounds of my defeat. They were waiting for the tears. The script said I was supposed to cry. I was supposed to drop to my knees, gather the useless plastic and beg him for forgiveness. I was supposed to be hysterical. I was supposed to apologize, promise to be quiet, promise to be stupid, promise to be the perfect wife again. They needed me to break. My breaking was the final, satisfying punctuation on his display of power. I did none of those things. I looked at the cards on the floor. I looked at Marcus, who was pouring himself another triumphant whiskey. I looked at Brenda, who had sat back down on her white suede throne, sipping her wine. I sighed. It was a small, quiet, tired sound. It was the sigh of a woman who has just sat through a long, badly acted play and is ready for it to be over. My reaction, or lack of it, was the one thing they hadn't planned on. My calmness was a foreign, hostile act. It was a rejection of their entire world. Slowly, deliberately, I bent down. Not to get the cards. I stepped over them. I picked up my phone. I picked up my lipstick. I picked up my keys. I left the wallet and the cards where they lay. Then I walked past them and sat down on the expensive, uncomfortable white sofa opposite Brenda. "Imani, did you not hear your husband?" Brenda hissed, her smirk faltering. "He has cut you off." I ignored her. I pulled up the silk sleeve of my blouse. I looked at my watch. It was a simple, elegant steel Cartier, a gift I had bought myself with the first big bonus I ever earned, back when I was a different person. Back when I was me. I looked at the time, 10:17 p.m. I had been calculating, 72 hours. That's how long the bank's fraud department had told me it would take for the final automated lockdown. My anonymous tip had gone in 69 hours ago. That left 3 hours. But Marcus, in his arrogant, impulsive rage, had just done something beautiful. By logging into the account and manually, frantically canceling cards, he had triggered a high-velocity, high-risk flag on an already flagged account. He hadn't just accelerated my timeline. He was my timeline. Marcus was sputtering. My calm was infuriating him more than any argument could have. You think this is a joke? I own you. You have nothing." I finally looked at him. My face was unreadable. My smile was gone. The empty, serene mask was gone. He was, for the first time, looking at me. "Is that it?" I asked. My voice was not soft. It wasn't loud. It was flat. "Are you done?" "Done?" he roared. "Done? I've just taken your life apart." "Have you?" I asked. I settled back into the sofa. "It doesn't feel like it." He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing. He had used his nuclear weapon and I was still standing. He didn't understand. Nothing. That's what he thought I was. That's what he thought I had. He thought I was the beautiful, simple girl he met at that charity gala 5 years ago. He never once, in all that time, asked me what I did before him. He never asked why a simple girl was on the junior board of 3 nonprofits. He never asked why I liked to read the Wall Street Journal. He never knew about the numbers witch. Before I was Imani Sterling, the silent wife, I was Imani Lloyd, the numbers witch. I wasn't just an accountant, I was a forensic accountant. I was the youngest senior associate at one of the top 3 firms in the country. My specialty wasn't taxes. My specialty was hunting. I hunted money that mobsters thought they had hidden. I found assets that cheating husbands had buried in offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. I was the one the feds brought in, quietly, to look at the books of corporations that were too big to fail, but were rotting from the inside. I could look at a 10,000-line spreadsheet and I could smell a fake invoice. I could see the ghost in the machine. I could find the single misplaced decimal point that was the key to $1 million fraud. I was a bloodhound, and data was my scent. I loved my job. I loved the hunt. I loved the moment when a man, just like Marcus, sat across from me in a glass-walled boardroom, sweating, realizing that I knew everything. Then I met Marcus. He was a whirlwind. He was charismatic, funny, and devastatingly handsome. He was, I thought, successful. He ran his own import-export business. He was impressed by my beauty, not my brain. He saw my job as a cute, stressful hobby. Brenda was the one who sealed the deal. A man like my Marcus, he needs to feel like a man. Imani, she had told me, her hand over mine, back when she was pretending to be my friend. He needs a woman at home. He doesn't want to come home and compete with his wife. He has all this money. Why would you want to shuffle papers? So I retired. I stepped back to manage the household. It was a seduction, a poison. I let them put the sharpest part of me to sleep. I became Mrs. Imani Sterling, a beautiful, brilliant woman who everyone, including my own husband, believed was a simple, beautiful idiot. And for 5 years I let them believe it. For the first 2 years I was numb. I was, I admit, seduced by the lifestyle. The travel, the clothes, the beautiful, empty days. But a hunter with nothing to hunt doesn't just stop being a hunter. I got bored. And a bored forensic accountant is a very dangerous thing. I was managing the household. So I decided to manage the household. I started with the joint accounts, the household budget. And that's where I saw the first crack. It was a recurring wire transfer. $20,000 every single month. On the 15th, the recipient was coded as Sterling, LLC Consult. I was curious. I didn't recognize the vendor. I asked Marcus about it. "Oh, that's just a consulting fee, baby," he said, not even looking up from his phone. "Boring business stuff." "Consulting for what?" I asked, my voice light. "Imani, please," he said, his voice hardening. "Don't bother your pretty head with it. I've got it handled." That night at 3 a.m. while he was sleeping, I went to work. I sat in my home office, in the dark, with my own personal laptop, an encrypted, air-gapped machine he didn't even know existed. The numbers which was awake. It took me 15 minutes to find Sterling Holdings LLC. It was a shell company, and the sole proprietor, the name on the incorporation papers, Brenda Sterling. My blood ran cold, but it wasn't fear, it was recognition. The hunt was on. For the next year I lived a double life. By day I was the perfect, simple wife. By night I was a forensic investigator, and my target was my own husband. His company was a sham. It was a classic pass-through. He was a launderer. He was taking in dirty money. I didn't know or care from where, and washing it. And he was using his mother as the primary tool. He was funneling hundreds of thousands of dollars into her shell company as consulting fees. He was buying assets in her name, her condo, her car, her art, so that his own name was clean. He was so arrogant, so sloppy, he was structuring the payments to fly under the $10,000 federal reporting limit. But he was doing it on the same day every month, a pattern so obvious it screamed. He was using his mother as a mule, and she, so blinded by greed and adoration, was happily signing her name to a federal crime. He wasn't just a controlling, insecure man. He was a criminal, and he had just handed me the weapon I needed to destroy him. He had forgotten who he married. He had forgotten what I do for a living. The deeper I dug, the clearer the picture became. This wasn't just a simple case of a man hiding money from his wife. This was a criminal enterprise, and Brenda wasn't just an enabler, she was the primary co-conspirator. She was also the primary liability. Marcus was arrogant, but Brenda was greedy. Her greed was the engine, and his ego was the wheel. He used her. He set up a web of shell companies, all with her name as the president and sole signatory. Sterling Holdings LLC. B. Sterling Imports, Brenda's properties. He wasn't just giving her money, he was washing it through her. He'd wire $20,000 to Sterling Holdings as a consulting fee. A week later, Sterling Holdings would wire $19,500 back to him as a capital return from a different entity, leaving Brenda with a $500 cut. It was sloppy, it was amateurish. And it was a federal crime, plain and simple. She was signing her name to dozens of transactions a month. She was signing fake invoices for consulting work she'd never done. She was signing the deeds on properties bought with cash that she had never earned. She had realized, thought she was a business partner. She thought she was a matriarch building an empire with her son. She sat on her white suede sofa, drinking his champagne thinking she was a queen. She was a mule. She was, in my world, what we called a trophy account, a patsy so blinded by the lifestyle, so high on their own supply that they happily signed their name to the evidence. Marcus had insulated himself by making his mother the legal face of his entire fraud. I sat in the dark, my face illuminated by the glow of spreadsheets, and I felt a cold, hard pity. He wasn't just going to get away with it. He was going to let his mother take the fall. He had built a house of cards, and he had made his own mother the foundation. He had handed me a hammer. A real investigation isn't about moving fast. It's about being meticulous. It's about building a case so clean, so perfect, that by the time you spring the trap there is no escape. I didn't want to just leave him. I wanted to end him. My first move, 6 months ago, was to protect myself. I used my encrypted laptop to open a new private firewalled trust. I did it under my maiden name, Amani Lloyd. I used my premarital funds, the bonuses I'd earned as the numbers which, money he never even knew existed, as the seed. I methodically, over weeks, liquidated the few joint assets I could legally touch, a stock portfolio I managed, and moved my half into this untouchable trust. I was now financially invisible to him. My second move was to build the weapon. For a solid patient year, I did not just observe his crimes, I curated them. I created a file, a digital masterpiece of his destruction. Every single wire transfer, every fake consulting invoice, every single incorporation paper for every single one of Brenda's shell companies. I mapped out the flow of money, from its dirty unknown source, through Brenda's accounts, and back to Marcus, clean and pressed. I created a timeline. I cross-referenced the wire transfers with his business trips. I cross-referenced the property purchases with Brenda's vacations. I built a case that didn't just suggest fraud. I built a case that proved beyond a shadow of a doubt a multi-year conspiracy to commit money laundering and wire fraud. And the star witness, the name on every single piece of damning evidence, Brenda Sterling. I didn't just have a file, I had a missile, and I had it pointed directly at the woman who had just smirked about me going hungry. I sat on this information, I waited, I continued to be the perfect, simple, smiling wife. I was a hunter, and a good hunter knows how to be patient. I was waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I was waiting for him to make a mistake so arrogant, so final, that it would justify the fire I was about to rain down on his head. Tonight, he gave it to me. The dinner party tonight was not a surprise. I knew it was coming. What Marcus and Brenda didn't know was what happened 3 days ago. It was a Tuesday. Marcus had been on the phone, screaming at a banker about a delayed transfer. He hung up, saw me, and snapped. "What are you looking at? Go make a menu or something. Go be useless." That was it. That was the final click. That night, at 3:15 a.m., I sat at my desk, my encrypted laptop open. I opened the file, Project Scorched Earth. I took a deep, steady breath, and I attached it to an email. It wasn't an email to a lawyer. It wasn't an email to the police. That would be too slow, too messy. I sent it through a series of encrypted anonymous rerouters, directly to the Central High-Level Fraud and Compliance Department at their bank. The subject line was simple: Anonymous Report, Federal Wire Fraud and Money Laundering Scheme, Act, Done 440-2881. I knew as an accountant exactly what would happen. A report this detailed, this perfect, wouldn't go to a clerk. It would go straight to a senior manager. It would trigger an immediate high-priority internal audit. And more than that, it would trigger the bank's automated, federally mandated protocol to protect themselves from liability. They would have no choice but to freeze everything connected to the flagged accounts. Every asset, every cosigner, every shell company. I had called the bank's compliance hotline the next day, pretending to be a concerned third party to ask about timelines. The answer was precise. For a federal-level flag of this nature, ma'am, a full asset lockdown is automated. The system is set to engage 72 hours from the initial flag. 72 hours. Tonight, when Marcus ripped my cards from my wallet, I wasn't just counting, I was counting down. When I looked at my watch, it was 10:17 p.m. The lockdown was scheduled to happen at midnight. But then Marcus, in his magnificent suicidal arrogance, had gone into the app and started a fire. By manually and violently canceling cards on an account that was already under a high-priority federal flag, he had poured gasoline on the server. He had triggered a cascade of security alerts, screaming to the system that the account's owner was erratic, unstable and a massive flight risk. He thought he was canceling my cards. What he was really doing was pushing a giant red panic button on his own life. He didn't just accelerate my timeline. He became my timeline. He had given me a gift. I had been prepared to wait until midnight. Now I knew I wouldn't have to wait more than an hour. The silence in the penthouse was thick and heavy. It had been, I noted looking at my Cartier, almost exactly 1 hour. 11:19 p.m. Marcus and Brenda were in the living room, drinking. They were performing their victory. Marcus was on his phone, loudly scrolling through pictures of cars, deciding what to buy with the money I saved. He'd announced. Brenda was reapplying her lipstick, her eyes flicking to me every few seconds, checking for tears. They were profoundly, deeply disappointed that I was not a wreck. I was still sitting on the white sofa, my hands folded in my lap. I was perfectly calm. I was just waiting. You know Marcus, Brenda said, her voice loud, that little blonde at the bank, the one who handles your accounts. She seems very smart. Maybe she could give you some real support. You're right, Mom, Marcus said, not looking up. At least she knows her place. My calm was a wound to their ego. They were trying to make me bleed. They needed a reaction. And then, right on cue, Marcus's phone rang. The sound, a sharp jarring, electronic ring cut through the quiet. Ugh, Marcus scoffed, looking at the screen. It's the bank. What do they want at this hour? He shot me a cruel, triumphant smirk. See? Probably calling to tell me my smart wife is a beggar. Calling to ask if I'm sure I want to cut her off. He picked up the phone, and in a final glorious act of arrogance he did the one thing I had been praying for. He hit the speakerphone button. This is Marcus Sterling, he snapped, his voice full of his own importance. Mr. Sterling, this is Mr. Davies, the regional manager for high net worth accounts. I am calling you after hours as a courtesy. The voice from the speaker was not the little blonde Marcus and Brenda liked to patronize. This voice was deep, it was male, and it was cold. A courtesy? What about? Marcus said, his tone still arrogant, but a sliver of confusion creeping in. Mr. Sterling, Davies said, his voice flat, this call is to inform you that a federal flag has been placed on your primary accounts. As of 11:15 p.m., a full mandatory lockdown has been engaged. Marcus's face froze. What? A lockdown? I don't understand. It means, the voice said, that all assets linked to your social security number, your checking, your savings, your investment portfolios, are frozen. Further, all associated cosigners and subsidiary accounts have also been frozen. The glass of whiskey slipped from Marcus's hand. It shattered on the marble floor, the sound echoing in the dead silence. Mr. Sterling, are you there? The voice from the speaker was persistent, unemotional. Cosigners? Marcus stammered. He was still staring at the shattered glass. He wasn't processing, he was a salesman. This was a technical problem. He was lost. Brenda, however, was not. Subsidiary accounts? She asked, her voice suddenly high and thin. She had stood up. Her face, which had been a mask of smug satisfaction, was faltering. That is correct, ma'am, Mr. Davies said. Our system has flagged a network of LLCs linked to the primary account, all of which are now frozen pending a federal investigation. What LLCs? Brenda's voice was a whisper. I have a Sterling Holdings, a Bain Sterling Imports, and a Brenda's Properties among others. All transactions from these entities have been suspended. A hold has also been placed on all physical assets tied to these accounts, including real estate and vehicles. The blood drained from Marcus's face. Investigation? What investigation? The bank cannot comment on the specifics of an active federal flag, Mr. Sterling, Davies said, but the system has flagged a multi-year pattern of structured sequential transfers, all of which originated from your primary account and were funneled through the aforementioned LLCs. The IRS and the Treasury Department have been automatically notified. That's when it happened. I watched it. Brenda's face, which had been pale with confusion, was now collapsing in on itself with the dawning sickly horror of understanding. She understood it before Marcus did. He was just a con man. She was the one who signed the papers. She knew her name was on the condo. She knew her name was on the car. She knew her name was on the accounts that held, she thought, her money. She, the matriarch, the business partner, the queen, had just been told that she was, in the cold hard language of the bank, a subsidiary, a cosigner, a mute. She wasn't just broke. She was implicated. Brenda made a sound. It was a small, choking, wet sound, like a balloon deflating. No, she whispered. She stumbled forward, her eyes on the phone as if it were a snake. No, you don't understand. Those are my companies. That's my money. Marcus, tell him. Marcus was a statue. He was pale as the marble floor. He couldn't speak. Mr. Sterling, ma'am? Mr. Davies's voice was unrelenting. Brenda looked at her son, her god, her golden boy, and for the first time she was not looking at him with adoration. She was looking at him with pure unadulterated terror. Marcus, she breathed, her voice trembling. The condo, in Florida. Marcus, the deed. I signed the deed. The money. Where did that money come from? Mom, shut up, Marcus hissed, finally unfreezing. Shut up, Mr. Davies. This is a mistake. A computer error. You can't just freeze my money. Sir, this is not a computer error, Davies said, his voice now carrying a note of disdain. This is a federal mandate. The bank is legally obligated to comply. We have flagged over $2.7 million in fraudulent wire transfers, all originating from you, all funneled to her. He didn't even have to say her name. Brenda's face. Oh, her face. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. It had gone from smug to confused, to terrified. It was now a sickly pale, gray-green, the face of a woman who just realized she was not the partner. She was the evidence. She wasn't just going to be poor. She was going to prison. Her son had built his entire criminal enterprise on her signature. He had turned his adoring mother into his fall guy, and in her greed she had happily signed her name to her own destruction. This is her fault. Brenda shrieked, her mask of composure shattering into 1,000 pieces. She pointed a trembling, manicured finger at me. She did this. She set us up. Which? Ma'am, the bank is not interested in your domestic issues, Mr. Davies said. A hold has been placed. You will be contacted by a federal agent in the morning. Do not attempt to access your accounts. Do not attempt to leave the country. Good night, Mr. Sterling. The line clicked dead. The silence that followed was heavier, more profound than any I had ever experienced. It was the sound of a world ending. Marcus was staring at his phone, his mouth open. Brenda was shaking, her eyes wide, staring at the empty space where her future used to be. Which? She whispered again, her voice dead. Slowly, I stood up. The sound of my heels on the marble floor made them both flinch. I walked to the bar, my hips swinging just a little. I poured myself a tall, cold glass of water. I took a long, slow, satisfying sip. Fraud, Marcus? I said, my voice clear and light in the dead air. That's just so messy, all those structured payments. The same day, every month. You screamed amateur. A child could have found it. He looked up at me. His eyes were blank with shock. He was seeing me for the first time. The numbers which. You did this, he breathed. I smiled. No, Marcus, you did. You and Brenda. You built this entire fragile, stupid house of cards, and you just forgot who you married. I walked back to the hallway, to the mess of my purse. I calmly put my lipstick and my keys back inside. I left the canceled cards and the wallet on the floor. I turned to my husband. You see, Marcus, you were right. You did cancel all my cards. My joint cards. The ones tied to your criminal enterprise. You were so busy being the man. You completely forgot about my cards. I reached into my pocket, the one in the silk dress he'd bought me. I pulled out a card. It was not a joint card. It was sleek, black and heavy. This, I said, is the Imani Lloyd Trust card. Set up with my money, from my career. The one you and your mother convinced me to leave 5 years ago because you were afraid of it. I looked at Brenda. Her face was a ruin of running mascara and dawning, agonizing regret. I'll be at the hotel, I said, walking to the door. Marcus, you'll be hearing from my lawyer. Not for alimony, for an annulment, based on fraud. I don't want a dime of your dirty money. I just want to be scrubbed clean of you. I opened the door. The fresh, cool night air of the hallway hit my face. I was free. I paused at the threshold and looked back. Brenda was on her knees, her hands in her hair, sobbing. Marcus hadn't moved. He was a statue of his own failure. Oh, I said, as if I'd just remembered something. And Brenda? She looked up at me, her face a pathetic tear-streaked mess. You were right, I said. And I gave her back the same cold, ugly smirk she had given me. Hunger does make women behave fast. I hope you're hungry. I walked out, and I didn't look back.